The story begins quietly, with a warm breeze brushing through the courtyard of a university in Doha. Students move around with backpacks, coffee cups, tired eyes, and hopeful dreams. Among them is a Filipino student named Marco, a hardworking scholar juggling classes, part-time jobs, and late-night study sessions. He came to Qatar with one purpose: to build a future that could change his family's life back home. But he never expected that one question, asked purely from his heart, would shake an entire room and reach the ears of a man who rarely spoke publicly. It happened during an open forum hosted by the university. A Qatari business tycoon, known for his silence and his power more than his personality, agreed to speak for the first time in years. His company owned hotels, construction firms, transport networks, and even major stakes in oil and tech. Students whispered his name like he was a myth. People said he never laughed. Others said he never listened to anyone outside his circle. Some claimed he only cared about his empire. No one really knew. Marco attended the forum not because he admired the tycoon, but because his professor forced attendance for extra credit. He wasn't expecting anything. He sat in the back row, leaning on the wall, thinking about his shifts later that night. He didn't even prepare a question. The forum began with polite applause. The tycoon stepped on stage, tall, composed, wearing traditional attire, eyes sharp but unreadable. He spoke slowly, almost cautiously, like a man who knew every word he said could cost millions. He talked about business principles, market changes, investments, failures, global expansions. Students scribbled notes. Some pretended to understand. Marco zoned out halfway through, thinking about his mother texting him from the Philippines, asking if he had eaten. Then came the Q&A session. Students lined up at the microphone, asking predictable questions. How do you stay motivated? What industries should we invest in? What is the future of energy? The tycoon answered each with rehearsed confidence. It felt like a podcast episode, not a real conversation. Marco didn't plan to speak. But as the moderator announced the last question, something pushed him forward. He surprised even himself. He walked to the microphone with shaky hands, heart pounding. The entire hall turned toward him. The moderator almost ignored him, but the tycoon raised a hand signaling, "Let him speak." Marco cleared his throat. His voice cracked. He didn't ask about money. He didn't ask about industries. He simply asked, "Sir, if you lost everything tomorrow, your companies, your wealth, your status, what is the one thing you would hope people still remember you for?" The room froze. Students stared. The moderator blinked. Even the cameras paused as if waiting for a reaction. It wasn't a typical business question. It wasn't even about success. It was about humanity. And no one had ever asked the tycoon something like that publicly. For a moment, the tycoon just looked at Marco. Not with annoyance, not with impatience, but with something deeper, something raw. He removed the microphone from its stand, walked toward the edge of the stage, and sat down, facing the audience like a teacher talking to children. He said slowly, "I have been asked thousands of questions about money, but no one has ever asked me what remains when the money is gone." His voice softened. He told the audience that he grew up poor, that his father passed away when he was young, that for years he worked not out of love for business, but out of fear of being powerless again. He built empire after empire not because he wanted more, but because he never wanted less. He admitted that the world praised him for wealth, but never for kindness, because he had never allowed himself to show it. Then he looked at Marco again and said, "If I lost everything, I would want people to remember that I never stopped trying to build opportunities for others, even when I failed to build a life for myself." Silence washed over the hall. He went on to share regrets he had never spoken aloud. He regretted missing family events. He regretted treating life like a race. He regretted chasing numbers instead of people. He regretted never slowing down long enough to ask himself if he was truly happy. The audience listened, stunned. The tycoon then stood up, walked toward Marco, and said, "Young man, what made you ask that question?" Marco hesitated. Then he explained that back home in the Philippines, people didn't measure success purely by wealth. They measured it by how much you helped others, how much joy you brought, how deeply you loved. He said he asked the question because he was tired of seeing successful people chase everything except peace. The tycoon nodded, visibly moved. He placed a hand on Marco's shoulder and said, "You reminded me that legacy is not about buildings or companies. It is about people. And today, a student from a faraway land reminded me of that truth." The crowd applauded, not politely, but emotionally, like they had just witnessed something life-changing. What happened next shocked everyone. The tycoon called the university board on stage and announced he would create a new scholarship in Marco's name. Not because Marco was the top student, but because Marco asked a question that deserved to be remembered. The scholarship would fund students from low-income families across Asia, giving them opportunities he wished he had been given when he was young. Marco stood frozen, tears in his eyes. He couldn't process it. He didn't imagine his simple question would spark something so massive. The tycoon ended the forum by saying, "A single question can change the world, if it comes from a place of truth." Word spread across the campus within hours. Students shared clips online. Comment sections exploded. People wrote that the moment felt real, human, unscripted, something rare in a world full of carefully crafted images. News agencies picked it up. Interviews followed. People debated what success really meant. Parents shared the story with their children. Teachers discussed it in classrooms. It became a reminder that sometimes the most powerful things are not achievements, but conversations. Weeks later, Marco received a private invitation to meet the tycoon at one of his offices. When he arrived, he found the tycoon sitting alone, no entourage, no advisors, just a man with a cup of tea. He told Marco that his question kept him awake for days. He realized he wanted to shift his empire toward impact, not just income. He asked Marco to intern at his foundation, an offer the student couldn't refuse. During the internship, Marco saw a different side of the tycoon. Not the billionaire who commanded boardrooms, but the man who listened quietly to families in need, who visited hospitals without cameras, who funded housing projects anonymously. Marco learned that beneath the layers of power was someone who wished he had been brave enough to show vulnerability earlier. Months passed, then a year. Marco grew, learned, and became one of the trusted voices in the foundation. He wasn't wealthy, but he was fulfilled. He managed projects that brought clean water to villages, education to children, and relief to struggling workers. He realized that influence didn't come from money. It came from intention. One afternoon, during a site inspection in a rural area, the tycoon turned to Marco and said, "Do you know why your question changed everything?" Marco shook his head. "Because you reminded me of the one thing I forgot," the tycoon said, "that success means nothing if it doesn't touch lives." The documentary ends with a simple moment. Marco returning home to the Philippines during a break. His family welcomes him with hugs, food, laughter. He sits at the dinner table, surrounded by love, and realizes something profound. He didn't need to be a tycoon to change the world. He just needed to ask the right questions. And sometimes one honest question can open doors bigger than any fortune. Fade out.